But to start our discussion here this morning, I would ask you to give a very warm welcome to Scotland's Deputy First Minister and also the local MSP for Perthshire North, John Swinney, please.
Bernadette, thank you very much. And you'll only be able to say that I'm the MSP for Perthshire North for about another 5 days. Not that I'm counting, Bernadette, before the dissolution of Parliament on Wednesday, and we have to take our chances again with the people of Scotland. But it's a great pleasure to be here in my dual capacities as a member of the Scottish Parliament for, well, actually, you're in my constituency, so a very warm welcome. I hope you spend a lot of money in the shops while you're here. It's always nice to boost the local economy when you're at a conference. And secondly, as the Deputy First Minister, because the agenda that Bernadette has talked about, which you're going to look through today, is an agenda which has underpinned the direction of policy within the Scottish Government since since throughout the term of the SNP government since 2007, but Bernadette quite rightly talked about the fact that a lot of the thinking about which has founded the journey that we are on didn't just start when the SNP government came to office in 2007. It started before that, and the discussion was led by Sir Harry Burns as the Chief Medical Officer in a way that essentially broadened thinking. And it's actually, that's really quite a very illustrative point to think about to begin with. There's Sir Harry Burns, the Chief Medical Officer, sort of bursting down boundaries and barriers to think that if we want to secure the best opportunities and the best prospects for our children, as Chief Medical Officer, he didn't need to just look at the health issues. It was a much wider discussion about well-being and educational opportunity and economic opportunity and social opportunity. And I suppose that is my absolutely fundamental point in the discussion today, the point that has underpinned what we've been trying to do in the last 9 years, and certainly what's underpinned the approach that I've taken on the wider issues about the role and the outlook and the perspective of the public services of Scotland, that in all circumstances we need to be thinking out with the boundaries and the compartments within which we operate. Because we will never transform children's services if we simply think, well, we have these children's services in this compartment and it's about how we reshape them within this compartment. That will never, ever meet the expectations that we have to meet if we are to deliver a sizable and significant change in the experience of our youngest citizens. Because I think as Bernadette went through there, she went through a lot of the research evidence. The research evidence on all of this is absolutely crystal clear. The earliest we can make effective interventions to ensure that young people at the very earliest ages are able to fulfill their potential, the more the likelihood is that we will give those individuals the best chance and the best start in life. So the thinking that's gone into the government's agenda around this whole area of policy is driven by the acceptance of that fundamental point of research evidence. So I think the challenge for us, and it's always the challenge, is how do we move beyond that absolutely universally accepted point of research evidence to then deliver and deploy interventions that will ensure that we deliver better outcomes for the young people of Scotland. And in that challenge, I think there are a number of key characteristics. First of all, we have to make sure that organisational boundaries are not an impediment to delivering those successes. And we could spend a lot of time, and invariably we, in public sector life, we spend a lot of time kind of reorganising things and rearranging things and changing and redeploying bodies and all the rest of it. And of course, there may well be issues that we have to confront in that respect. But fundamentally, what we have tried to do and what we should continue to try to do is to ensure that organisational structures are not an impediment to delivering on that and responding substantively to that research evidence about ensuring that young people are able to deliver on their potential as a consequence of the effectiveness of our intervention. So that's the very first thing, that organisational structures should not be an impediment. The second is that we have to ensure that everybody recognises their role and their responsibility in ensuring that they do their bit and participate effectively in the collaboration that can transform the life chances of children in our society. And some of that will be about, well, we should be limitless about that, because there will be a whole range of different organisations, individuals, different players in the lives of young people that will be able to make a positive contribution towards ensuring that a better outcome is delivered for those young people. And essentially creating a collaborative environment is crucial to guaranteeing that we make a greater impact on the lives of those young people. So the creation of a culture of collaboration and joint working is crucial. The third, and this might be it is a statement of the bleeding obvious, but I'm going to make it. We must make sure that the child is utterly central to everything we do. I remember sitting in Parliament in it must have been about 2000, and any former directors of education will be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this. The Standards in Scotland School Bill, it was 2000, wasn't it? Yes, I'm getting a nod in the corner. And Sam Galbraith, the then Minister, was delivering a statement to Parliament about what the thinking was behind the Standards in Scotland Schools Bill. And he came out with a statement in which he said, this bill puts the child at the centre of the educational experience in Scotland. And I remember sitting there thinking, what do you need to say that for? That's a bit of a statement in the bleeding obvious. But actually, it was essential to make that point in law, in statute, that the child is utterly central to to the design of the interventions and the approaches and the solutions that we bring forward. In that case, it was on the Standards in Scotland School Bill, but it's as relevant to the discussion that you will have today, and it's utterly central to whether or not we make any discernible impact on improving the life chances of young people if we don't follow that direction of thinking in this agenda. And I think that is for me is the key test in all of this, because the needs of the child and the well-being of the child and the securing of the opportunities of the child, if that is what is driving our thinking, then it will drive the collaborative culture that I've talked about, because it will require it, and it will shatter the organisational impediments, or it should shatter the organisational impediments that are in the way of trying to actually deliver that outcome for young people within our society. So if we acknowledge and accept that the child is utterly central to the requirements of the system, then to deliver the best outcomes for our children, then that should be the driver of all of these developments. Of course, that's great in theory. There are always organisational impediments, and there are always people, and sometimes both organisational structures and people can be impediments to development, which I suppose brings me to the acknowledgement, the acceptance that unless we embark on this as a truly unified national endeavour, then we won't succeed. What was encouraging from what Bernadette said about the experience here in Perth and Kinross, and I can testify to this, all 41 elected members of the local authority here accept this agenda and do their level best to try to drive it forward. And that will have been of enormous assistance to policymakers and officials within this locality of being able to drive this agenda, because they've got very clear, unified political leadership about these points. And of course, I come from I come from a tradition which is not always a unified tradition of bringing everybody together to points of agreement. So this is really special. If we've got all the politicians of Scotland agreed that this is the right thing to do, and actually in Parliament, we're very fortunate. We've got a pretty broad consensus that this is the right approach to take, and we've demonstrated that yet further. Many of you will have taken part in the tremendously reforming atmosphere of the early years collaborative that's been taken forward, particularly pioneered by my colleague Aileen Campbell, the Minister, and her predecessor Adam Ingram into the bargain. There's been tremendous impetus given to this in the creation of a national unity purpose around this objective. And that should help us in creating a better atmosphere and ethos around which we can deploy the necessary interventions to achieve the objectives that I'm talking about. And I suppose for those of you who are actively involved in this work and who may come up against the obstacles of organisations and people, I suppose what I'm saying to you is you really should be pretty intolerant of all of that and really challenging about that, because nobody can sustain a line of arguments that says, well, I'm not doing that. It might be good for the child, but I've got my organisational boundaries to think about. What a ridiculous line of argument to advance. So you should feel empowered to challenge that, and to challenge that assertively and aggressively, because what should be driving this agenda is securing the best interests of the child. So I hope out of the whole process of discussion that we are going through as a country on this question, you as the professionals involved in this area are you feel empowered to take forward this agenda. One final point from me on why this all matters. Why does this all matter? Well, it matters for two reasons. One, because of what I've said about the well-being of our children. What could be more important than making sure that our children get off to the finest start in life and they have the best prospects of success? And that's important because every child, no matter their circumstances, should be able to make that start in life and to move on that route and to have the experience of the best experience that can be available to our children. And it's not good enough to just have that experience for some of our children and not all of our children. But the other reason why it matters is because of the wider consequences of all of this for us as a society. If our young people get off with the best start in their life, then they are less likely to be offenders at a later stage in life. They are more likely to be economic contributors to our society. They are more likely to be positive role models in our society, able to perpetuate the positive experience that they will have had if they have had a positive experience. And that is why it matters, because if we want to create a society in which is more cohesive, a society which ensures that people have got better opportunities, that people can live lives in safety, with high levels of well-being, with high levels of personal satisfaction and contentment, then we will only do that if we properly and effectively support the youngest of our citizens and ensure that they can achieve their full potential. So, in short, it matters for all of us because the future of our society and our country depends on it. And to achieve that, we have to be prepared to be collaborative, to involve all manner of different individuals and organisations who have something to contribute. We shouldn't put people off. We should involve people in the process. And we need to be constantly challenging and innovative about how we deliver services, because this is a learning journey for all of us. And there will be new points of learning that we need to discover and to confront. And to do that, we have to have a willing culture and climate of innovation to enable us to do that. I very much welcome the research that's underpinned the programme here in Perth and Kinross. I can see the benefits of it for the for the children of my constituents locally, and I have seen this local authority go through a very radical process of reform in its services to good effect in the course of representing people in this area over the last number of years. So I would encourage you to engage actively and constructively in this discussion today, and to share what will be the learning that's going on in every part of the country, because in every different part of the country, different experiences will throw up different answers and to different challenges, and we should be open in our thinking about how we learn from that, because what we're trying to address is one of the most important issues any country can address. How can we get it right for every child in our society? Thank you very much.
We haven't planned questions.
Of course, yes.
Okay. We hadn't scheduled in questions, but Mr. Swinney does have some time, a few minutes, if there were any questions that anyone wished to ask of him. Can I get an indication of any questions? Come on, don't be shy. I know it's early on a Friday morning, but anyone wish to ask a question? It's not often you get the DFM in the room. Perhaps maybe I could ask a question, John. One of the reasons that we've called this conference here today is that we now, across all of the Tayside authorities in Renfrewshire and North Ayrshire, we now have very, very rich data on the vast majority of our children. We've never had that quality of data before. And importantly, and Renfrewshire colleagues are further ahead than the rest of us, but we're using that data to influence where we're investing money. But clearly we're thinking about the return on that investment and investing in those main evidence-based programmes that we know works. And this is transformative in terms of children's lives, and that's why we're so excited about this. We do think it ties in very well to government priorities. So your endorsement of the work that we've been doing here in Perth and Kinross Council and partnership is very important. Is this the kind of approach that you would like to see rolled out across Scotland?
I think the point about data is very important, Bernadette, because what it does is it enables us, I think, to be more predictive about what we may confront, and therefore if we can be more predictive about what we may confront, we can prepare to deal with that and ideally to avoid it. And Harry Burns is doing some really interesting work at the University of Strathclyde on looking at data sets that enable us to more effectively predict some of the challenges that we will face within our public services and in demand for public services, and in how we can improve outcomes for individuals. So I think maintaining a rich data source and data set is really important, but more and beyond that is then using it to identify how can changes in practice and performance deliver a very different experience for members of the public. So I certainly would encourage the gathering of that data and its interrogation, and therefore, and as a consequence of that, the shaping of policy to deal with what that data tells us.
Thank you very much, John. I don't see any indications of anyone wishing to ask questions. I think. There's one over there. Yes, sir. I would like to say who you are and where you're from, please.
Gary Dover from Glasgow City Health and Social Care Partnership.
You're welcome.
It was just your question. You were just talking about the fact that this isn't just about children's services changing, and it's about the wider public service and whatever. And I wonder if you can give me examples of, from a national level, how the other parts of the sort of public sector is actually changing to adapt and develop to improve life for children, and not just children's services.
Yeah. I think if you... The key device that we've used to try to advance this agenda has been the structure of community planning partnerships, because what we acknowledged, if we go back to the Christie Commission report that we received in 2011, the Christie Commission essentially recommended to us, the government's response to the Christie Commission was structured around driving our public services through themes of developing the people at local level, of encouraging partnership at local level, about improving performance, and about focusing on prevention. But crucially within that, we acknowledged that solutions had to be arrived at a local level. So in a community planning environment, the drawing together of local authority, health board, police, fire, enterprise, third sector services into a collaborative discussion is designed to essentially create these joined up services at local level. And we have invested a lot of time and energy into the creation of that effective community planning infrastructure, not for it just to be a sort of, a forum where people collect their own individual plans, but where people bring their resources and their ideas and their outlook to then structure their collective services within that collaborative space. Now, I think I'd be the first to admit that process has delivered some real improvements in the way in which services interact. If I think about the interaction between local authority, childcare and early years services, with the interaction with healthcare services in terms of the well-being of individuals, we can see much more integration emerging around the needs of children. And there's some really strong examples of how that has been undertaken. Further through the age span, there has been better and more effective interaction between local authority education services, police services and the criminal justice services to enable us to deliver better outcomes for young people, where we've been able to put in place interventions that have, well, essentially redirected young people off a criminal justice path and much more into a constructive path, which might not always be within the formal education system, but may better meet their needs within those circumstances. But crucial to all of that has to be the drawing together of these services around that community planning table, and for that to be done in a meaningful way that changes the way in which services are delivered. If I've got any criticism of all of that, my criticism is it's not happened nearly fast enough. And I think that is the challenge that we face, because as a society we will face many pressures on our public services through changes in demography. We'll have more demand for elderly care services, we'll have more demand for well-being services for children, and authorities are wrestling with these challenges all the time. So the pace of reform and alignment of these services has to intensify to address the challenge that you set out in your question.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for just one more question, if there is one further question. John, you have a question. There's a microphone just coming to you. John, could you just say who you are? We know who you are, but...
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Fife. I'm a Senior Deputy Chief Executive in Perth and Kinross. I think you've partly answered the question I was going to ask you, Deputy First Minister. I was really happy to hear your approach to GIRFEC and about getting it right, because I think that is fundamental to what all of us in this room today are trying to achieve for the young people in Scotland. However, in terms of pace and community planning, I just want to tease that out a bit more, if you don't mind. Are we ambitious enough in the targets we're setting ourselves? Because fundamentally, one of the issues about public service delivery over the last 20, 30 years is that we tend to operate in silos, but people live in communities. And we have to make that shift to deliver with communities and for communities going forward.
I think that's, we are constantly pressing to intensify the pace of that alignment and reform. So it's a central part of our agenda to drive that. And there's strong buy-in, but I think it's just not moving as fast and as dynamic as we would like. So we're constantly looking for ways in which we can intensify that process. We've steered away from mechanisms of incentivization resting kind of far more significantly on encouraging and motivating a voluntary atmosphere of collaboration. Now, we may need to, like if you take health and social care integration as an example, that's been kind of kicking around as a concept for many years, but we've just legislated for it so that it's got to happen. And, you know, I would prefer not to have to legislate for these things to happen, because I think that you then end up in a great debate about institutional architecture and about statutory responsibilities and all that goes with it. I'd much rather we operated in a culture where we all rolled our sleeves up and got on with it very, very fast and aggressively attacked the boundaries and the compartments that get in the way of joint working. And I think that's the key message I would say that I would share with you today, is that I think there's an opportunity for public servants to really be empowered to drive this agenda, and I would encourage you to do so. And I hope today helps in that process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swinney. Can we please show our appreciation this morning? Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Thank you.